Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I hope you had a good lunch. My name is Stan Markov and I'm the CEO of Runecast. And next to me I have one of our greatest customers. It's Michael Stucker from DLR in Germany. Just to let you know, the whole session will be in English, so apologies for that, I don't speak German. But I'm pretty sure that you would understand me. So I'm going to start with just a short introduction of Runecast, and I would really love to hear what Michael has to say about how they're using the product and what kind of environment they have. And before we start, I'm just curious to know how many of you have heard of Runecast before. If you could raise your hands. Okay, just a handful. And how many of you have actually tried Runecast? No one. Okay, that's perfect then. That's perfect because we're going to have a live demo here. So we're going to show you exactly how the interface looks like. It's pretty straightforward. So after the session, you can also try it for yourself. All right, let's get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Stan Markov. Everybody calls me Stan. Apart from being a CEO and co-founder of Runecast, I'm also a VCDX number 74, a VCI, vExpert. I've been doing VMware for quite some time. Together with my other colleagues, co-founders of Runecast, we have been living and breathing VMware for about 10 years. So we were working in a big corporation of the name of IBM for many years. So we had to deal with medium, large customers, very different implementations of VMware. And year after year, we were troubleshooting and we were facing problems that we could not find a way how to avoid. Most of these problems that we had to troubleshoot, we ended up reading a Knowledgebase article and realizing that these were already known issues. They were already documented in the VMware Knowledgebase, but we found out about them only post factum, only after suffering for hours or days. And that's why we decided to develop Runecast Analyzer. It has unique functionality on the market. How is it unique? It's correlating the VMware knowledge base with the vSphere configuration and logs. So it helps you discover proactively potential issues in the VMware environment before they cause the major outages. This is different from other products out there that are focusing mainly on performance, capacity management, which is good. But we decided to focus on the main pain that we had during operations, discovering these seemingly undiagnosable issues that are hidden in your environment, and there is no human possible way of you knowing all the documented known issues out there in the knowledge base. By the way, the knowledge base has over 30,000 knowledge base articles documented. As mentioned, Runecast Analyzer is created by a team of experts. I myself am VCDX, all the other guys, they're at least VCAPs, vExperts, and active in the community. So we really decided to develop a product from administrators to administrators. So this illustrates how we're normally troubleshooting problems. Right? Normally there is a, of course, monitoring system, so whenever anything crashes in the data center, whether it's VMware or some other system, normally administrator would get an alert. So when he gets this alert, he would normally search the symptoms somewhere on the internet. In case of VMware, in up to 90% of the cases, we ended up reading a Knowledgebase article. And sometimes it really took a long time. I'm assuming a lot of you have been to the Knowledgebase, and usually when you're browsing to the Knowledgebase, in many cases this means you already have a problem. So we decided to change that because this massive amount of IT information, a massive amount of information, valuable one, which is located in the Knowledgebase, had only been used reactively, only after the problem happened. So that's the main problem we decided to solve. In a unique way to be able to increase the availability, performance, and security of your systems by discovering the issues proactively. That's the core of Runecast Analyzer, the core of our product, discovering these potential issues in the configuration and logs. Along the way, we decided to look at other operational issues we've been experiencing. Some of them are listed here. We used to do security health checks manually. It was hard for us to follow best practices on all of the customers, even if we did fit gap analysis on some customer and align them to the best practices. 6 months down the line, they were misaligned again. So it was hard to keep track of that. Another problem we saw is that we were collecting the logs from the vSphere environment, but dumping it into a central location, but those logs were practically unusable if we had to extract any valuable information from them. That's another problem we decided to solve, and all of this led to really a lot of time lost in troubleshooting. We developed Runecast Analyzer. And Runecast Analyzer is a virtual appliance. It comes in OVA format. It's easy to download it from our website, deploy it in your infrastructure. It will not make any changes on your environment unless you trigger some of the configurations. So don't worry, it will not break anything in your environment. It will just report the risks that you have in your vSphere environment. It doesn't upload any information over to the internet, so everything stays on premises. The only reason why it would need to connect to the internet is to download any new updates, new knowledge base articles or updates of the product itself. Runecast Analyzer uses 3 main sources of truth to do the analysis, and these are the VMware knowledge base, best practices, the standard VMware best practices, and the vSphere security hardening guides. So those spreadsheets that are released for every version of vSphere and that are normally used for applying security policies. The VMware knowledge base, by the way, is updated continuously, as you probably know. There's new knowledge base articles released every week. Old ones are being updated. We're tracking all that and making sure to include all the updates in our central repository. We do one additional thing that I have not mentioned here on the slide. We're also monitoring social media. So some of the most critical issues out there, there were cases when they appeared in someone's blog or someone's community profile. And if it emerges to be a big issue on Twitter or other social media, we look into it and we may add it in the product before even VMware releases official knowledge base article for that. Okay, this is just a quick diagram displaying the architecture of Runecast Analyzer. So the appliance is running on premises in the company network. It may connect to the Runecast central repository to download any new updates, but it will not upload anything over to the internet, so it's perfect for environments that require higher security. We even provide an offline ISO if it's such a secure environment that you would not want Runecast Analyzer to connect to the internet at all. It can work in completely offline mode. So it will collect a lot of the data from vCenter. Some of it is collected from the ESXi host, for example, the hardware details through CIM. And also it collects the ESXi logs for analysis. Now we talk about KBs. I assume all of you have been to the VMware knowledge base and have suffered from some of those problems that are described there. But just to give a few examples. And that first one, I'll not go into too much details, but let me tell you the story of the first knowledge base article. We had this problem on one of the customers we were supporting. They had incorrectly configured VMFS heap size on their ESXi hosts. There was an HA event on one of the big clusters, so one of the hosts failed. And due to the problem described in this article, HA could not restart the virtual machines on the surviving hosts. There was a huge panic. That customer restarted all the other ESXi hosts because they didn't know what to do. So there was pretty much impact of the whole environment. And only 2 days later, we discovered, it was pretty hidden, that the problem why HA did not work was in that knowledge base article and these advanced settings that were set incorrectly. Once the management found out about this, we were tasked with validating all of the customers in EMEA, and we're talking about hundreds of those VMware environments, whether or not they are at risk based on this one single knowledge base article. Now imagine how many hundreds of knowledge base articles your environment may be at risk from. And again, it's a problem which anyone can experience, and nobody can really manually check all the settings and keep track of all the knowledge base articles. So Runecast Analyzer does this for you. The other KBs are quite common as well. One is related to snapshot consolidation task failing. If you have CBT enabled on virtual machines and specific build number of your ESXi hosts, some of you might have experienced that one. Or the third one is referring to purple screen of death. If you have hardware LRO enabled on the host, again, specific build number and virtual machines running on that host with hardware version 11 and with VMX-Net 3 driver. So these are just 3 out of hundreds examples that you can have. And one of the customers that we're really proud of, because we're space enthusiasts and we love everything related to space, is German Aerospace. And I'm very happy to have on stage here Michael, and he will talk a little bit more about what they do and how they use Runecast Analyzer. Yeah.
Thank you, Stan. So, welcome from me also. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of who I am, what we do in the German Space Operations Center, and how we have been using Runecast to address and alleviate issues that we found in our virtual environment. I'm a senior technical engineer now, 7.5 years at DLR, which is the Deutsches Luft- und Raumfahrtzentrum, the National Aeronautics and Space Research Center for Germany. The DLR has about 8,000 employees throughout Germany in about 20 different locations. The biggest one is near Munich in Oberpfaffenhofen, and that's also where the German Space Operations Center is hosted, where I also work. One of the missions of DLR is the exploration of Earth and the solar system, as well as conducting research for protecting the environment. And with the exploration of Earth and the solar system, that's where the German Space Operations Center comes in. The main responsibilities, the main duties we have in our day-to-day business is basically the 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, day-to-day, minute-by-minute operation of satellite missions. Controlling those satellites, getting data from those satellites back to Earth and processing them. We also do support for the actual satellite launches and the initial phase, which is a bit different from the actual operating phase of a satellite. And we are also the control center for the international research module, Columbus, on the International Space Station. Just to give you a very quick overview of what missions are out there that we are currently supporting, I listed a couple of those missions up there. Basically, those missions fall in 3 broad categories. There are Earth observation satellites, there are communication satellites, and human spaceflight. And when we're talking about human spaceflight from the DLR point of view, that's always encompassing the Columbus research module at the International Space Station. Now, our environment and how this all came to pass. Before 2008, all the satellite missions out there, they were using dedicated physical servers. Each satellite mission had its own set of dedicated physical servers just for that specific project and for that specific mission. Now, with the advent of virtualization, we started around 2008 with vSphere 3.5 or ESXi 3.5 then. And in the next 4 years, we virtualized the majority of the shared infrastructure systems and the non-project critical systems. After that time, we had enough knowledge built up to actually convince the projects to also virtualize those really important project critical, mission critical systems. The current state of the affair is that we have about 80 ESXi hosts with north of 1,000 VMs with a virtualization ratio of above 97%. What are the specific challenges that we in the space industry are facing? Those may differ from what usual IT projects look like. For example, the project lifetime of one of our projects, namely a specific satellite mission, can and in parts actually is multiple decades. The mission I've listed on here, that's the GRACE mission. That's an experimental satellite, a pair of satellites actually, that are doing analysis of the gravitational field of planet Earth. And these satellites have now been in orbit for 15 years, as you see. The launch was on March 17, 2002. And although one of those satellites has by now failed, the other one is still working and giving good data. So with that in mind, you see that the lifetime of a mission can be really, really long. And on top of that, you have a multi-year design and planning phase before the satellite even gets into space. A little bit coupled with that is the fact that we also have very long system uptimes. We try to limit this, but due to historical precedents, let me put it this way, people are very averse of rebooting systems if it's not really, really, really necessary. We are operating in a very secure and therefore, for our purposes, heavily segmented network environment. That was, in the beginning of the virtualization, very helpful, but it also has negative impacts, which I will get into more detail a little bit later on. One of the main focuses, one of the most important things we have to think about in those missions is the actual availability and therefore also the redundancy of the systems that are in use. Because a crashed system, a system that's not available at a certain point in time, can lead to critical mission failures with a satellite. Because you have to imagine, satellites, you only, for example, the low Earth orbit Earth observation satellites, when they do an orbit, you maybe only get like 6, 7, 8 minutes per 90 minutes per 2 hours time to actually communicate with the satellite. If you fail to make contact with the satellite for 3 or 4 orbits, in that specific time frames where the satellite is actually visible by the ground station, it may have drifted off into another area if there was a problem, and maybe you will lose the satellite altogether. Or we have a specific satellite experiment currently in space. That's the TerraSAR Tandem project, which are doing Earth observation by radar waves. And those satellites, they are actually a pair of satellites that are flying at 28,000 kilometers an hour, but with only a distance of 300 meters between them. So you can imagine at that speeds, if something happens, and during that time when you actually have the communication, a window with the satellites, you are not able to do that. They may crash into one another. Of course, there are security systems in place to pull those satellites apart by themselves if they see they are too close to each other. But that is something you never want to have, because then you lose propulsion. And that's the one thing you cannot get up there to refuel. That's a thing you really don't want to have. I'm mentioning this specific challenge here due to the nature of our setup, we don't have a central storage where to put central data. Historically, the projects all had their dedicated servers. They all had their different file shares and data storage servers and whatnot. So there never was a centralized storage location, which was a bit of a problem when we went the virtualization route. Now, what are the challenges we're facing with the virtualization? The segmented network, on the one hand, it was very helpful in the beginning because we could concentrate on little network pockets where we just virtualize that first, then the other, then the other. But it's also led to a proliferation of different VMware versions. Because if you think about it, when I talked about long system uptimes, those areas that you virtualized first, they will stay that way for a long time, even if newer vSphere versions or update patches, something like that, is available. You will install this in another area that you virtualize later on. But the first one, it will always stay in a state where you say, oh, I really want to update, but the project says, don't touch it. I don't feel too good about it. That's also one of the things we have to be aware of. This environment is, for good reason, quite risk-averse and conservative at times. If you do not really need a system change or a reboot or something that's going to have an impact on your environment, please don't do it. And coupled together with the fact that we do have those enormously long mission lifetimes or project lifetimes as compared to other projects in the industry, we have to be very aware of the system obsolescence and how to keep those systems alive for the mentioned time. Now, where Runecast comes into play here, we had the first contact in October 2015 at VMworld. I found this tool, thought, now that looks interesting, might be really helpful in our environment. We had a first trial, internal trial in GSOC, and since January 2016, we have been using it in our production environment. Now, what does it actually do for us? It identifies, or for us, it identified a number of issues we were facing in our environment, partially correlating to the fact that we had this version zoo of VMware flying around in our environment, which we really couldn't get rid of. But now that we had some kind of documented list of issues and potential risks, we could go to the project and say, see here, that's really a risk you don't want to have. Please help us to standardize this environment, to go on an update path and work out a way to reduce those version zoos and try to keep a good update path. It also helped us in identifying certain configuration issues. Like I said, we virtualized from step by step by step many different areas, which sometimes led to the fact that with one ESXi server, when you integrated newly into environment, you forgot something. And that was very helpful in identifying those little issues. If the NTP server isn't set up correctly, especially for very, very time-sensitive applications that we are using in our environment, that can be a really bad thing. And of course, it's been really helpful in giving proactive information about the environment based on risks from new Knowledgebase articles, so that we could stay in front of any bad things happening. So I guess now it's time.
All right.
For the demo.
So yeah, let's take a look at the product. and I'm just going to give you a quick preview, and then Michael, I'll ask you also to talk about some of the issues that you detected in your environment. Well, let's start from the beginning, actually. So let me log out. As mentioned, Runecast Analyzer comes as a virtual appliance. So once you deploy it, literally takes minutes. You set up the IP address, and then you have access to the web interface. You can log in with the standard username and password. And then there are a couple of more steps you need to do, which are very easy. So this is the dashboard that you're going to see, hopefully not that red, but the dashboard that you're going to see once you connect to your vCenters. But if you click on the top right corner on this settings button, the first tab here says vCenter connection. So here you can add one or more vCenters that you want to analyze. Most of the information we're extracting from vCenter or from the ESXi hosts. Certain things we cannot extract from vCenter, like some specific hardware details, firmware levels, and so on. So connecting to vCenter is the first part. Read-only user is the minimum required, but there's a few more privileges. We mentioned them in our user guide that it's good to have in order to cover all possible checks. So you've set up the vCenter, that's step number one, and then you can point your ESXi hosts to send their logs via syslog to the IP address of the Runecast Analyzer appliance. You can do that by modifying the advanced syslog settings manually or via some script, or you can do it automatically here in this interface. So I clicked on the log analysis tab. Here I have the vCenters that I already added at the previous step, and it automatically detected the hosts and virtual machines that are under that specific vCenter. So if I click on the gear button here, it will, I can just select all the ESXi hosts here, and it will do the configuration automatically for me. So it will go to each one of the ESXi hosts, and it will set the IP address of the Runecast Analyzer appliance as a destination syslog server. If you already have such a syslog server, no worries. It will just add it as a secondary syslog. If you don't have syslog and the firewall on the ESXi is not open, it will also automatically open the firewall for syslog on that ESXi host. You can also set up the virtual machines to send their logs over to the appliance, because they can collect they log quite important data as well. Does anybody know where are the virtual machine logs normally by default? Anyone here? Yes? Yeah, usually it's where the VMX file is located, so it's in the virtual machine directory. So unless you set advanced setting in the VMX file for the virtual machines to send those logs through syslog as well, they will only be stored in that vmware.log file. So if you wish, you can set up all the virtual machines as well with that advanced setting, either manually or automatically through this interface. Just a small note, if you are setting that advanced setting for the virtual machines, you need to either vMotion them or power cycle them in order for this to take effect. With the ESXi hosts, the effect will be immediate. Okay, so we did that. We deployed the appliance, we set up connection to the vCenter, and we configured the log analysis optionally. We're all set. We can go to the main dashboard. We can click Analyze Now, which will start analyzing the configuration. The log analysis is happening automatically in real time. The configuration analysis takes between 20 seconds and 2 minutes, depending on the number of hosts you have in your environment. And on the main dashboard, you can see some important outcomes of the last analysis. So you could see how many critical, major, medium issues were detected, how many of the objects in your environment have some issues detected and how many don't. There's 4 important indicators here underneath. So how many issues were found in the logs? We have 5 of those. How many were found in the configuration? What's the level of security compliance and the level of best practice adoption? And this is interactive dashboard, by the way, so wherever you click, it will just show you a specific list of those particular issues that are mentioned here. Since now we support multi-vCenter environment, you just need one single appliance to connect to all the vCenters. On the main dashboard, you're able to see information about each individual vCenter. And you have like a global switch here next to the Analyze Now button where you can switch between the different vCenters and see information only about that individual one. Let's switch back to all vCenters and let's go to log analysis. So what I'm going to do now is on the left-hand side under the log analysis section, I'll click on KBIS Discovered. And this is a very valuable part of Runecast. Basically what this will do is Runecast Analyzer will collect the logs and it will search in real time for these problematic log patterns that are linking back to specific knowledge base articles. So instead of just giving you search functionalities, like many other products out there in the logs, where you have to know what you're searching for, with Runecast Analyzer, it will directly tell you, here's the problem that you're having based on these log entries, and here is the resolution that's mentioned in the knowledge base article. So if we expand one of those detected issues, and they are rated based on severity, so critical, major, medium, low, under findings, you'll be able to see what log entries were triggered by which host, at what specific time, and in details, you can read the actual knowledge base article, or you can read it also on the official public VMware knowledge base. So if we continue with the log analysis, this is really the most valuable, unique functionality of Runecast. We'll talk about configuration analysis also later on. But along the way, we decided to add one more functionality. It's called verbose dashboards. So in case the problem that you're experiencing is not already a known issue described in the knowledge base, this interface here can give you a very quick way on how to reach the root cause of the problem by navigating through your logs. Here we're filtering based on some important keywords like failed to, error, unable to, SCSI command, NMP, shell. So the colorful chart above will show you whether there is an increase of the number of log entries that include one of those important keywords. I was telling folks earlier also that recently we had a customer that they have been experiencing some slowness with their storage for quite a few weeks. They have been trying to troubleshoot, but with Runecast Analyzer, they quickly reached to the root cause. So it was a problem with one of the data stores. They saw an increase of the NMP log entries, so they were quickly able to identify which data store is actually causing the problem. So even though it's an additional feature we added, verbose dashboards is also quite useful. Okay, let's go to the configuration analysis. So far the log analysis was correlating the knowledge base with what we can see in the logs. So in real time searching for the problematic log patterns. With the configuration analysis, it's a bit more complex because we have to analyze tons of configuration settings, hardware settings, and even take into account dependencies between the inventory objects. I will maybe give the word to Michael once more. Maybe if you could demonstrate some of the KBs that you saw in your environment.
Now let's see what we have here. One of the issues that we were actually facing was here something that the support for newer Intel processors of the newest generation, the V4 Intel Xeon processors, they were only supported if you had specific BIOS firmware and microcodes installed, which is something that presented a problem for us because we had a server suddenly die on us and no one knew what the actual issue was. So that was certainly helpful in figuring that out. Other stuff that is currently a bit on our radar is a critical issue. This specific critical issue that we have also seen in our environment, we are currently in the phase of fixing that to applying all the patches. But as I told you, sometimes updating and keeping those systems up to date isn't all that easy in our environment. But Runecast has certainly been helpful in convincing the partners and the project that we work with that it's a really important issue. Once you have some issue identified, or once Runecast identifies this issue for you, it not only gives you the actual details of the problem that you're facing, like you know from the knowledge base, but it will also show you what actual objects are affected by that issue. So it will list the ESXi hosts based on their maybe ESXi version or specific configuration that is relevant to that host, or if it's a VM-related issue, you will see the VMs popping up with the indicators that let you know this issue really applies to that object. For example, one of those that we have seen in our environment were some issues with Windows virtual machines that were using the E1000 network driver. And we actually did see some impact in our environment because due to network losses, intermittent packet losses, and with this you can see now there are some VMs here that might be facing this issue because they have the quote-unquote bad network adapter. Also quite helpful is the best practices that the tool gives you hints about what you maybe should do, shouldn't do. For example, I mentioned the NTP stuff before. That's very important to us because we require very good time synchronization between the different tools that we're having, so that there aren't any problems in the communication with the satellites. And sometimes just fate interferes and you forget some setting on an ESXi host, and that's certainly helpful in finding those stray servers that may be having a configuration issue that you should have thought before, or for example VMs that still have connected CD-ROMs. We have seen in our environment certain ISOs, they are mounted in our environment from a data store that's been actually provided by a VM. This VM is clustered, and once we perform a cluster switch, this NFS store basically gets handed over to the other cluster VM. And some VMs that have mounted that NFS store, for example, having ISO images for install or setups, they suddenly behave very weirdly because people who not usually work full-time as a vSphere administrator, they just mount an ISO, do some stuff, install something, and then completely forget about it. And half a year later, they are wondering why the machine has suddenly stopped working because it lost its connection to its local CD-ROM. That's something we always have to run behind people to tell them, now, please disconnect the CD-ROMs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why did you choose Runecast?
We chose Runecast because it helped us in addressing issues that we found in our IT environment.
And what value do you think Runecast Analyzer brings to your business?
With Runecast, we were able to address issues that we found in our environment, to actually document them and have basically a list of things that we had to change in order to increase the stability and performance of our environment.
That sounds great, thank you. And in your opinion, why do you think Runecast Analyzer is different or better than the other solutions on the market?
As far as I know, I don't know of any other solution that provides those features of Runecast, like the correlation to the knowledge base.
And what advice would you give to your peers?
My advice would be just try it out. Maybe you like it.
That's great. And also my last question as a space enthusiast is I would like to know what space missions we are contributing to the success of, so we are ensuring that the environments are in perfect shape.
Basically, we have a lot of different missions currently in use and some future missions. One of the missions that's scheduled to be run next year or maybe this year is a small greenhouse in space where there's going to be research on the growth of food in space. So that's what you're actually helping with.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a great feeling to be part of that. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.